Nia Odieno paced outside Kenyatta National Hospital, her hands trembling as she stared at the busy gates. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of sirens filled the air, but all she could think about was her little girl, Zuri, lying in the children's ward upstairs. At just 6 years old, Zuri's heart was failing. The doctors said she needed urgent surgery in India, a chance to live that came with a cruel price tag, $57,000. For months, Nia had done everything a mother could. She sold her car, her jewelry, even the small salon she'd built from scratch. Every day she shared her story online, praying that someone out there would help. Her words spread across Nairobi and beyond. Strangers sent messages, donations, and prayers. Church groups, old school friends, even boda riders showed up at her doorstep with whatever little they could give. Bit by bit, the total climbed. And then one evening, the notification came. Goal reached. $57,000. Nia stared at the screen through tears that wouldn't stop. She pressed her hands to her face, shaking with relief. Her baby was going to live. She rushed home to tell her parents. Mama Ruth cried, hugging her tight, and Baba Peter clapped her back proudly. Zuri's going to live, she whispered, her voice breaking. They held her close, maybe a little too long. Nia didn't notice it then, but behind those smiles, something darker was already taking. Greed was waiting for its moment. 2 days later, Nia sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open, ready to finally send the money to the hospital in India. Zuri's surgery date was close, and the doctors had been waiting for confirmation of payment. Her hands shook as she typed in her password, but her heart was full of hope. Then, in 1 second, that hope disappeared. Her screen flashed a number that didn't make sense. Her balance read $0. Nia froze. She blinked, refreshed the page, checked again. Still nothing. Her chest tightened as if someone had squeezed the air out of her lungs. No, she whispered, her fingers trembling. She grabbed her phone and called the bank, barely able to speak. The customer service agent on the other end checked her account and said calmly, "Ma'am, the transfer was made yesterday to Mr. Peter Odieno's account." Nia's stomach dropped. Mr. Peter Odieno. Her father. For a moment, she couldn't move. Then she ran barefoot, breathless, out of the house and into the street, waving down a boda. "Umoja," she told the rider. "Please hurry." When she reached her parents' gate, she could barely breathe. Her mother, Mama Ruth, came out quickly, her face pale and nervous. "Nia, calm down," she said, holding her hands up. "Your father, he needed the money for a business deal." Nia stared at her in disbelief. "A business deal?" Her voice cracked. "That was Zuri's heart fund. That money was for her surgery, for her life." Before Mama Ruth could answer, Baba Peter stepped out from the house, wearing a clean shirt and his usual confident look. He didn't even seem guilty. "Stop shouting," he said sharply. "We're family. I took the money for an investment. You'll thank me later when it doubles." Nia's heart pounded in her ears. She felt dizzy, almost sick. "You stole from your granddaughter," she screamed, tears running down her face. "She's dying, Baba. How could you?" Her father scoffed, walking past her toward his car. "You're too emotional," he muttered. "That's why you'll never succeed." Nia's cries grew louder, her voice echoing through the neighborhood. People began to peek from their windows and gather near the gate, whispering. But she didn't care who saw. She shouted until her throat hurt, demanding her money back, demanding an answer. Her mother stood frozen, torn between guilt and fear, while her father simply walked away, shaking his head as if she was the problem. Neighbors whispered her name, some in sympathy, others in disbelief. Nia sank to the ground, clutching her chest, unable to stop crying. Just 2 days ago, she believed her child had a chance to live. Now, in one cruel moment, that hope was gone, stolen by the very man who was supposed to protect her. Nia sat on the hospital bench, staring blankly at the white wall in front of her. Her mind kept replaying the words from the bank, her father's voice, her mother's silence. It felt like the world had ended, but somehow she was still breathing. The hospital had sent a reminder. Zuri's surgery was scheduled in 2 weeks. They needed the payment immediately, or they'd give the slot to another patient. She tried calling her parents again and again, but her calls went unanswered. Her father had blocked her. Her mother's phone rang endlessly. Every time she heard the automated voice, "The person you are trying to reach," her chest tightened a little more. Days passed, and Zuri's health started to worsen. The once lively little girl who loved drawing hearts on everything now struggled to stay awake. Tubes surrounded her tiny body, and the soft beeping of machines filled the silence. Nia stayed beside her day and night, sleeping in a chair, refusing to go home. She held Zuri's hand, tracing the small fingers she'd once painted with pink nail polish. One night, as the rain fell outside, Zuri looked up at her weakly. "Mommy," she whispered, "am I going to die?" Nia's throat tightened, but she forced a smile. "No, baby. Mommy's going to fix it," she said softly. But inside, she was breaking apart. Every promise she made to her daughter felt heavier, harder to keep. Her savings were gone. Her fundraiser was gone. And the people she trusted most had turned their backs on her. Then, a few days later, a family friend stopped by the hospital. He hesitated before speaking, looking uncomfortable. "Nia," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. Your dad didn't use the money for a business deal. He used it to pay off some gambling debts, and he put the rest into a fake land investment. The people he gave it to vanished." For a moment, Nia just stared at him. Then the words sank in, and her whole body went cold. "So it's all gone?" she asked. He nodded. That night, Nia sat by the hospital window watching the city lights blur through her tears. Her world had completely collapsed. Her trust, her family, her hope. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, was gone because of her father's lies. She looked over at Zuri, sleeping peacefully, a tiny oxygen mask on her face. Nia placed a hand on her daughter's chest, feeling the faint rhythm of her heartbeat. It was weak, but still there, still fighting. In that quiet moment, Nia made herself a promise. If her father had taken Zuri's chance to live, she would take his comfort, his peace, and his pride to get it back. Whatever it took, she would find a way to save her daughter. Because a mother's love doesn't break, it rebuilds itself into fire. Nia walked into the police station with shaking hands, clutching a folder full of documents, bank statements, screenshots, messages, proof that her own father had stolen her daughter's surgery money. She explained everything to the officer behind the desk, her voice trembling but determined. When she finished, the officer sighed, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Madam, this sounds like a family issue. Try to settle it at home." Nia stared at him, speechless. "A family issue?" she repeated. "My child could die because of this." But he just shrugged. The other officers nearby chuckled quietly. She walked out, feeling humiliated and furious. A few days later, her anger turned to shock when she saw her father's Facebook post. He had written that his ungrateful daughter was spreading lies about him, that she was unstable and desperate for attention. People commented with sympathy for him. Some even called Nia a bad daughter. It was like being stabbed twice, once by betrayal and again by the lies. Still, she didn't stop. She couldn't. Zuri's condition was getting worse, and the bills kept growing. Nia started working nonstop, styling hair in people's homes during the day, cleaning offices at night. She barely slept. Her body ached, but every time she looked at Zuri's face, she pushed herself harder. In her free moments, she began documenting everything. She kept a notebook, took screenshots, saved receipts, and backed up every message. She created a digital file on her laptop labeled Truth. Every detail, every proof of what her father had done went in there. One night, her old friend Tasha came to visit. Tasha was a journalist, sharp and tech-savvy. Nia showed her the file, explaining everything through tears. Nia sat in Tasha's small apartment, the glow of the laptop screen lighting up their tired faces. For weeks, Nia had gathered every piece of evidence: bank transfers, voice notes, texts, and screenshots. Together, they went through each file carefully, organizing and labeling. Every document told a story of betrayal: her father's fake investments, the missing donations, and even the proof that he'd been using her fundraiser to steal from other families too. "This isn't just about you anymore," Tasha said, scrolling through the files. "He's been doing this for years. You're not the only one he's hurt." That night, they came up with a plan. They created an anonymous social media page called Kenya Justice Watch. No names, no faces, just the truth. Tasha helped Nia upload everything, one post at a time. Screenshots of fraudulent transfers, voice recordings of her father bragging about his connections, videos of him at the bar, drunk and boasting about easy money, even photos of his handwritten IOUs from gambling dens. Once they hit post, there was no turning back. Within hours, the page started gaining attention. By the next day, the hashtag #HeartlessFather was trending across Kenya. People were outraged, not just at what he did, but because so many recognized the same man. Victims started commenting, sharing their own stories of being scammed by Mr. Peter Odieno. The story spread like wildfire. Local blogs picked it up, then online news outlets. Neighbors whispered. Old friends unfollowed him. His business partners started calling, demanding answers. Within a week, his construction company shut down. The church elders called an emergency meeting and expelled him from the congregation for bringing shame to the community. At home, the silence grew heavier. Then one evening, Mama Ruth called Nia, her voice breaking over the phone. "Nia, please stop this," she cried. "You're destroying our family name." Nia took a long breath before replying, her tone cold but steady. "You destroyed your granddaughter's chance to live," she said. And then she hung up. Tasha looked at her quietly. "Are you okay?" she asked. Nia nodded slowly. "No," she said. "But I'm not done yet." For the first time in months, she felt something stronger than pain: purpose. She knew this wasn't only about revenge anymore. It was about justice, not just for Zuri, but for every person her father had cheated. As the online storm grew, people began messaging Kenya Justice Watch, offering more tips and evidence. Tasha worked on tracing them, while Nia planned the next move. She wasn't going to hide anymore. Her father had stolen her child's hope, but now she was taking back her power, one truth at a time. The world finally saw who he really was. And Nia? She was just getting started. When a producer from a local TV station called, Nia almost hung up. She wasn't sure she could face the world again, not after everything that had happened. But the woman on the line spoke gently. People need to hear your story, Nia. You can help others who've been through the same thing. That night, Nia sat awake beside Zuri's bed, watching her sleep. The thought of telling her story scared her, but she also knew this was her chance, not just to fight for her daughter, but to expose the truth fully. By morning, she said yes. A few days later, Nia walked into the TV studio. The bright lights made her squint, and her hands trembled as a makeup artist fixed her hair. She wore a simple blue dress, the same color as Zuri's favorite blanket. When the cameras rolled, she took a deep breath and began to speak. My daughter's heart was failing, she said softly, and my own parents took her lifeline. This isn't just about money, it's about humanity, about what greed can do to a family. Her voice shook at times, but she didn't look away. She spoke about the fundraiser, the stolen money, the police who ignored her, and the online fight that followed. She talked about sleepless nights at the hospital, about hope, and about how she refused to give up even when everything was taken from her. By the end of the interview, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. The host leaned forward, whispering, "You're one of the strongest women I've ever met." When the video aired that night, it exploded online. People across Kenya shared it, then across Africa, then beyond. Comments flooded in, messages of love, outrage, and prayers for Zuri. Some said they cried watching it. Others said Nia had given them courage to stand up against their own family injustices. By the next morning, Nia's name was trending again, but this time for the right reasons. Her new GoFundMe link, shared during the broadcast, began receiving donations faster than she could refresh the page. $5 here, $20 there, then hundreds, then thousands. People from Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, even the UK and US contributed. Some of the people her father had once scammed sent her messages of apology and donated too. When Nia checked her account later that day, she covered her mouth in disbelief. Over $100,000 had been raised overnight. Enough for Zuri's surgery, travel, and recovery. She sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "Thank you, God." In that moment, the weight of months of pain started to lift. Her father had tried to silence her, but her truth had become louder than his lies. The world had seen her heart, and it had answered with kindness. The news spread fast, faster than anyone expected. After Nia's TV interview went viral, the pressure on the authorities grew impossible to ignore. People filled social media with angry comments, tagging the police, demanding action. Headlines called it the Heart Fund scandal. Even politicians started tweeting about it. Within days, the police who once laughed at her case reopened the investigation. One early morning, a police car pulled up to her parents' gate in Umoja. Neighbors peeked through their windows as officers stepped out with arrest warrants. Baba Peter came out shouting, insisting it was all lies, waving his hands like he could stop it. But this time, no one was listening. Cameras flashed, journalists crowded the gate, and the same man who once walked with pride through the neighborhood was handcuffed in front of everyone. Her mother, Mama Ruth, stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face. She tried to defend him, saying it was a family misunderstanding. But the police told her to come in for questioning too. She had helped move the money, and they had proof. The whole neighborhood watched silently as the car doors slammed and the sirens wailed away. When Nia heard the news, she didn't feel joy, just a heavy, quiet relief. After months of fighting, crying, and begging to be believed, the truth had finally caught up with. Still, a part of her heart hurt. These were her parents, the people who raised her, who held her as a child. But now she barely recognized them. That evening, she went to the station to collect some documents. As the officers led her father past her in handcuffs, he stopped for a moment. His face was full of anger and shame. "You ruined me," he hissed under his breath. Nia looked him straight in the eye. "No, Baba," she said quietly. "You ruined yourself." He turned away, his shoulders slumped. The proud man she once feared now looked small and broken. Back in Umoja, the community was buzzing. The man everyone once respected was now a symbol of greed and disgrace. Neighbors whispered as they passed the Odieno house, shaking their heads. Some pitied Mama Ruth. Others said she deserved it for keeping silent. The same gate where family photos were once taken now stood as a reminder of how lies can destroy everything. Mama Ruth stopped leaving the house. Her phone rang constantly, angry victims demanding their money back, reporters asking for statements. One night, she broke down completely, sobbing alone in the dark. For the first time, she seemed to understand what her greed had cost her. Not just her reputation, but her daughter's love. Nia didn't attend the court hearing. She didn't need to see more. Instead, she spent her days at the hospital, smiling again for the first time in months. Zuri's surgery date was finally set. As she folded tiny clothes into a suitcase, she whispered a prayer of thanks. Justice had come, and now, hope was next. The air in the hospital hallway was cool and clean, filled with the faint sound of machines beeping in the distance. Nia stood there in a white gown, clutching Zuri's small teddy bear as doctors wheeled her daughter toward the surgery room. Zuri turned her head weakly and gave her a tiny smile. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered. Nia forced a smile, even as her eyes filled with tears. "I love you more, baby. You're going to be okay," she said, waving as the doors closed behind the gurney. When they clicked shut, her hands began to shake, not from fear this time, but from pure relief. After everything, they had made it here. The hospital in India was bright and calm, and for the first time in months, she felt hope instead of despair. The hours crawled by. She sat in the waiting area, fingers wrapped around the little cross she wore on a chain. Every beep of a machine or footstep in the hall made her heart jump. She replayed everything in her mind, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the endless work, and somehow, it had all led to this moment. After what felt like forever, the surgeon finally stepped out. His mask hung around his neck, and he smiled warmly. "It was successful," he said. "She's going to be fine." For a second, Nia just stared at him, unable to speak. Then her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, sobbing. Every tear she had held back over the months came pouring out, tears of pain, joy, exhaustion, and gratitude. The weight she'd carried for so long finally lifted from her shoulder. When she was allowed into the recovery room, Zuri was lying peacefully in bed, her little chest rising and falling steadily. Her skin had color again, her lips no longer pale. Nia brushed her daughter's hair gently and kissed her forehead. Hours later, Zuri's eyes fluttered open. "Mommy," she whispered in her soft, sleepy voice. "Can we go home now?" Nia smiled, her heart full. "Soon, baby," she said. "To a better home." The next few days passed in a blur of gratitude. Nurses stopped by to congratulate her. Other parents in the hospital came to hug her and say they had watched her story online. Every time Nia logged into her page, she saw thousands of messages, prayers, love, and encouragement. Back in Kenya, the news of Zuri's successful surgery spread quickly. People shared photos of her smiling in her hospital bed, calling Nia the mother who fought heaven and hell. Donations continued to pour in, not because she needed them now, but because people wanted to thank her for showing strength that inspired an entire nation. One evening, Nia stood by the hospital window, watching the sunset paint the sky gold. For the first time in a long time, she let herself smile without pain. Her daughter was alive, and that was all that mattered. Months later, when Nia and Zuri stepped off the plane in Nairobi, the warm air felt like a new beginning. Zuri ran ahead, laughing, her tiny hand waving as she called, "Mommy, hurry." Her face was glowing with health, her steps strong again. For Nia, every laugh, every breath her daughter took felt like a miracle. Life after the surgery had changed everything. Nia was no longer the woman who begged, cried, and fought to be heard. She had become someone new, stronger, wiser. She had faced betrayal, public humiliation, and heartbreak, yet somehow turned it all into power. With the money that was left from donations and support from kind strangers, she built something that carried both her and Zuri's name, Zuri Wear, a fashion brand born out of hope. The idea had come to her in the hospital in India. She'd noticed the colorful fabrics around her and thought, beauty can grow even in pain. When they returned home, she started small, designing clothes that told a story of strength and resilience. The line took off almost immediately. Influencers wore her designs, magazines wrote about her journey, and soon, Zuri Wear became a symbol of courage for single mothers across Kenya. At a public launch event, Nia stood in front of a large crowd, lights flashing and cameras rolling. Reporters asked questions about her success, but one question made her pause. "What kept you going when everything fell apart?" Nia smiled softly, glancing at Zuri sitting in the front row, proudly wearing a tiny dress from the new collection. "My child's heartbeat," she said. "It reminded me that some things are worth fighting for, even when it's your own family you're fighting." The audience went silent, then burst into applause. Some wiped away tears. While Nia's life was rising, her parents' world had collapsed. Her father's trial had ended badly for him. Most of his property had to be sold to repay the people he scammed. The once beautiful family home in Umoja now stood quiet, with strangers moving in. Neighbors no longer called them Baba and Mama Nia. They looked away when they passed on the street. Mama Ruth eventually came forward, trembling and broken, trying to make amends. The irony was painful. She came seeking help from the very person her greed had nearly destroyed. But Nia had changed. She had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Through her new charity foundation, the Zuri Hope Fund, she helped families who had been ruined by financial fraud, people like the ones her father had deceived. And when her parents were among those in need, she didn't turn them away. She approved their application quietly, without a word. That night, as she tucked Zuri into bed, Nia felt peace for the first time in years. She had lost everything once, her trust, her home, her family. But she had rebuilt it all from truth, and this time, it could never be taken from her again. The sun was warm that morning, and the sound of laughter filled the schoolyard. Nia stood among proud parents, her eyes fixed on the stage where Zuri, now a tall and confident teenager, was about to graduate. Her heart swelled as she watched her daughter walk across the platform to receive her certificate, her white dress shining in the light. The same little girl who once lay in a hospital bed, fragile and quiet, was now smiling wide, full of life. When the ceremony ended, Zuri ran straight into her mother's arms, holding something behind her back. "Close your eyes, Mommy," she said, grinning. Nia obeyed, laughing softly. Zuri placed a small handmade card in her hand. On the front was a drawing of a big red heart, and inside, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "My heart beats because of you, Mama." Nia's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Zuri into a tight hug, unable to speak for a moment. All the years of struggle, pain, and sacrifice rushed back, but this time they didn't hurt. They felt worth it. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "No one will ever steal from us again." As they stood together, the crowd around them faded. It was just the two of them, the mother who refused to give up, and the daughter whose heartbeat had guided her through every storm. In Nia's voice, the story closed like a promise. "They stole my money, my trust, and my peace, but I took it all back with truth and strength. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who keep your heart beating." And as the sun dipped lower, Nia smiled. Her fight was over. Her heart and Zuri's finally beat in peace.